In today's video, we're doing a deep dive into the autofocus of the Fuji X-H2S. The Fujifilm X-H2S has generated a lot of buzz since it was released this past July, with tons of reviews either praising or criticizing the design and functionality of the camera. One of the frustrating things for me, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one, has been the inconsistency in many reviews, mostly when it comes to the autofocus performance of the camera. Fortunately, I was able to get my hands on an X-H2S recently, and I put it through its paces in many regards, but in this video we are going to specifically discuss the autofocus performance. And not to bury the lead, but I will tell you up front that the autofocus is awesome in the X-H2S, especially for still photography. But more on that later. I will also add that I'm recording this video on the X-H2S in Fuji HD quality. To be completely transparent, I've been rather critical of the AF performance in the X-T4, which, although it's a great camera, leaves quite a bit to be desired when it comes to autofocus consistency in both still photography and especially when filming video. I released a video discussing DP Review's initial testing where it looked like the X-H2S wasn't going to fare much better than the X-T4 in the video autofocus department, to the chagrin of my fellow Fuji fans who I've lovingly labeled #FujiFlakes, because some of them can be quite sensitive about any criticism leveled at the Fuji brand. So I thought it was only fair to get my hands on an X-H2S and see for myself how good the autofocus is. And in this video I'm going to discuss both the still and video AF and show you a bunch of samples and give you my opinion on the autofocus and the camera in general for what it's worth. The first challenge I gave the X-H2S was photographing my two most difficult subjects, my kids. We headed down to the local church parking lot with our bikes and scooters in tow and started shooting. The camera was set to continuous autofocus with eye tracking enabled, and the continuous custom setting was set to setting number 1, which is multi-purpose. I was shooting with mechanical shutter at 15 frames per second because as a portrait photographer, there's really more than enough for me and for my needs, and it works very well for kids or family photos or people moving around rather fast. And long story short, the AF is light years ahead of the X-T4. The eye tracking is super sticky, and even when my kids were on the other side of the parking lot, it kept their faces locked in focus. In reviewing the photos, the percentage of images that are in focus is much higher than what I typically get with my X-T4. And although I didn't do a frame-by-frame tally, I will say that there were only a small handful of images that were not in focus. One thing that really impressed me was how the camera kept focus on my daughter's face even when she moved in between the supports of a railing. The X-T4 would never have been able to keep that in focus in my experience. Later that night, we ventured out to a street fair, and again, I was really impressed with the accuracy and the consistency of the autofocus in the X-H2S. I even captured some hip-level street shots, which were perfectly in focus, something that I never could really do with the X-T4. The next day, we hit up an antique car show at a local park, and once again, I was very pleased with the autofocus performance for still photography. Although it was not that challenging a situation, I was able to shoot in a manner as I do with my Canon R5 without feeling like I was making a big sacrifice in the autofocus performance and the results. So basically with my Canon, I shoot everything in continuous AF with tracking turned on, except for very specific circumstances. Then one morning I ventured out to a nature preserve to take some pictures of flowers and spend time playing with the settings of the X-H2S. And I happened to meet a really cool and knowledgeable photographer there who gave me a bunch of tips on photographing birds and insects, and so naturally I asked if I could take his portrait since I'm at heart a people photographer. I was really happy with the way his portrait turned out, And also happy yet again with the autofocus performance as I photographed bees and butterflies and stuff like that. At this point, I would also like to add that most of the images in this video were captured with the Fuji 16-55 2.8 lens, and the rest with an old version 35mm 1.4 Fuji lens. And I've heard people say that the focus isn't as good in the X-H2S with older lenses, but I really didn't find this to be the case in my testing. So it might be even better with the newer lenses. I would hope so. If it's not clear yet, the autofocus in the X-H2S is excellent for still photography. Now, I will say I don't think it's quite as good as the R5, but it's definitely on par, and I'm really happy with the improvement Fuji has made in this area. It was the first time, as I mentioned, that I didn't feel like I was making a sacrifice in AF performance when taking my Fuji over my Canon camera. And combined with 15 frames per second, it worked pretty flawlessly. One caveat is that I did not test at 40 frames per second, and although I'm sure the results will be different, I'm reviewing the AF as a portrait and family photographer and speaking in a practical sense that I really think most people would have no problem with regarding the AF performance in the camera. If you've watched a bunch of reviews like me, you would find that some people are having mixed results, mainly with the autofocus performance in video. Since I do mostly talking head videos, I decided to test the video AF in my studio and see how it tracked me as I walk back and forth from the camera. For this test, the continuous custom setting was set to tracking speed at +3 and AF speed at -2. The simple talking head video has been something that my X-T4 struggled with, and I'm glad to say that the new camera did a much better job keeping me in focus as I wandered about my studio, so check out this clip. What is up, everyone? So I'm here recording myself at my studio with the Fuji X-H2S, and I'm staring up at my Atomos Ninja screen. That's why I'm not looking at the lens, which is weird. And now I'm looking at the little camera screen too, but anyway, here we are. So I got my hands on an X-H2S truck for about a week, and I'm putting it through its paces so you don't have to. But now I have it set up on a tripod in my studio here, and I just wanted to see how the eye tracking does and how the focus does tracking me for video, because it seems to me that that's where people are having a little bit more trouble when it comes to video. So here I am. Let's see if I leave the screen, jump back in, leave the screen, jump back in. Now I'm gonna jump in from here. And it's hard to tell, but it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. I'm gonna back up, see how far it can track me. This is my studio. This is where I do all of my headshots and portraits. And it's my little man cave safe space that I love to hang out in. And I do all my videos. And we'll see how it does if I remove those glasses. I think it seems like it's doing a pretty good job to me. Wow, I think I look really good today. What do you guys think of the beard? I don't know. It's a lot of gray going on in there. I might shave it. Glasses? Got them. But like I said, here's my studio. I got some pictures on the wall, do my headshots in that back corner there. And then I have this artery backdrop right there that I use a lot when I do portrait work. And yeah, cool. All right, I'm gonna see how it did. As you can see, I was in focus really the whole entire time, whether I had my glasses on and off, or whether I jumped in the frame, or moved very far back, or very close. The X-H2S did an awesome job here, and for a talking head video, I don't think you're gonna have anything to complain about. The final autofocus test I did was at a playground with my family. Once again, there's solid improvement over the X-T4 when filming people outside moving around. In this clip of my daughter, for instance, the camera keeps her locked in focus even as she navigates in between the playground equipment, and it doesn't lose her as she turns around. In this clip of my son coming down the slide and walking towards me, the camera keeps him in great focus the entire time as I move back and he comes towards me. Overall, as with the still autofocus performance, I was very pleased with the video autofocus performance for talking heads and people videos. For my testing and purposes, I can say that the X-H2S is a huge leap up from the X-T4 in autofocus. When I started shooting with the X-H2S for this review, I didn't think it'd be anywhere near as glowing a review. And as a Fuji fanboy, I'm really happy with how the cameras performed. But as with most things, there is still room for improvement, so here are some of the negatives I found regarding the autofocus. The biggest drawback I found is that if you try to go from filming a person in tracking mode to a scene or an object in the same clip, the camera really struggles to figure out the situation. It's almost as if you can do one or the other, but not really both in the same scene. If you're filming with the camera set to eye tracking, but then cut to an object next to the person, I couldn't figure out the best way to get this. And sometimes the camera would give a focus box on the object I was filming, but sometimes it wouldn't. So there's certainly room for improvement here, and perhaps I was doing something wrong and someone can help me out in the comments section below. But I'm really hopeful that this is going to get much better as they continue to release firmware updates. Well, I have a lot more to say about the X-H2S, which I will save for another video. There are a lot of good things about the ergonomics, the performance, the build quality, but if it's already not abundantly clear, I'm really happy with the autofocus performance, and I offer my mea culpa because I really didn't think it would be as good as it is, and I've been pretty critical of the focus in Fuji in general. But in fact, after a week of shooting with the camera, I really fell in love with it, and it pains me to have to give it back. And although I won't probably be buying one soon, I think this represents a huge step for Fuji in competing with Nikon, Canon, and Sony. And I really could see myself using this camera for all of my studio work at this point without feeling like I'm making any sacrifices. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this review. And don't forget to gently press that like button. There's no need to smash it. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next video as I post them randomly at all hours of day and night. Here's wishing you a great day. Go out and take some awesome pictures, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.